All right, folks. Well, I'm going to create a little mini lecture here about writing effective instructions. And so I want you to pay close attention and I want you to put this particular presentation into conversation with some of the things that you've just finished reading. And so I've titled this little presentation, Writing Effective Instructions. And so here's sort of what I'd like to talk to you about in this brief PowerPoint presentation. First and foremost, I want to talk to you about why instructions are important in the workplace, which many of you probably already know, but I'd like to reinforce. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our goals in writing instructions, the things that we should hold ourselves accountable to. And then I'd also like to talk to you about what I call the three essential moves to writing instructions, which are staging, coaching, and alerting. And those will be the guiding principles that we use as we move from sort of our pre-writing into our writing phase of our instructions. So, instructions are important for a number of reasons, but any of you who have worked particularly in an industrial setting or a technical setting, but really most settings, you'll know that instructions are important. They're often called standard operating procedures or desk level procedures. But these procedural types of writing are critical because they really guide a lot of the work that happens in our workplaces. And it's really the job of good instructions to do a number of things. First and foremost, it's to keep people safe and to make sure that folks are following the right protocols when they carry out work. And that's particularly important in places where there are the types of dangers that we know to exist, like the risk of electrical shock or the risk of slips, trips, and falls, or those types of things. So really instructions are an important facet or an important way that we keep workplaces safe. They're also super important because they allow us to create consistent results, whether it's guiding a worker through how to handle a particular type of phone call or helping them produce a product or deliver a service. These procedural types of documents ensure that we're yielding a consistent result, that every batch that comes through, for instance, of say we were writing a standard operating procedure for how to make cookies, we want every single one of those cookies that comes out of our bakery to be super consistent because we know that's something that our consumers look for and our customers look for. And so really it's the job of the instructions to be as precise and as specific and as easy to follow as possible so that we can really create that type of consistency. Also, it's no secret that instructions can allow us to be more efficient. And I mean efficient in terms of time, energy, resources, materials. When we teach somebody how to do something really well, generally speaking, what we're doing is we're becoming more efficient. And it's also one of the ways that we can preserve knowledge within a workplace. So maybe you are someone who has handled a particular duty or task or procedure for a long time. You need to be able to hand that off at some time. Whether you're going on vacation or you're moving into a new position. So our ability to really give people these high quality procedural documents is one of our ways that we can preserve knowledge. So one of the things I like to talk about, and we talked about this to some degree when we were writing our resumes, is that we really want to set the bar high for ourselves. It's not really that hard on a resume or in a cover letter to appear qualified. What is more difficult is to be uniquely and exceptionally qualified. And I want to raise the bar a little bit here with our instructions. Our goal is not just to get somebody from point A to point B, to get them through a procedure. Our goal is to do it in the most consistent, efficient, safe way possible. And so in that way, we're trying to create an optimum set of instructions. And in so doing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent hardship on the part of our reader. We're trying to eliminate confusion. We're trying to eliminate redundancy or inefficiency. And so I'm going to hold you accountable to that when I evaluate your instructions. It's not that difficult to teach somebody how to make a batch of cookies. What is more difficult is to teach them how to do it consistently, efficiently, eliminating waste, eliminating frustration, and to do it in the most time efficient way possible. And so I want you to keep that in mind, that it's not difficult to guide somebody through a procedure necessarily. What is more difficult, though, is to do so with as few hiccups or problems as possible. One of our other goals is to make it as easy for the reader to reference and use as possible. There are tons of instructional documents out there that, yeah, they're functional and they do what they're supposed to, but they're not optimum in terms of the reader's experience. They're too small, they're too cluttered, they're too difficult to navigate. It's hard to find your place in the text after you leave it. And so in that way, I really want you to think about your reader's actual task and environment while they're doing this. And a lot of times we're writing instructions for really busy people and folks who are in an environment that has a lot of distraction. I also want you to think about the fact that folks generally are going to use an instructional document as a reference point. So they're going to be moving from the document itself to the place where they're doing the actual task. And so we want to facilitate a really easy reading experience. And so that means that if you have 22 sequential steps that are just tightly packed onto a page, that's going to make it relatively difficult for a reader to find their spot if they go to, say, perform step 12. It's going to be hard for them to come back and find step 13, so I really want you to think about that. And the other final thing that I really want you to pay attention to is, are these appropriate for your audience? So, I want you to write your instructions as though you're teaching somebody how to do something for the first time. And so with that in mind, I want you to keep in mind the types of language that you use, the way that you describe particular actions and those types of things. And so that might mean that you have to include extra steps or sub-steps. That might mean that you have to explain what certain language means. And so those are really our goals for our instruction. To me, this is the most important thing. And as I've said before, my goal as a writing instructor is not only to get you through the assignments of the semester, but to give you frameworks or systems or ways of thinking, habits of mind that allow you to carry out this work, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now. And so I want you to keep these 3 words in mind anytime you sit down to write a set of instructions. And they are staging, coaching, and alerting. You should be familiar with those by now. If you can really enact these 3 moves of staging, coaching, and alerting, you can write a set of instructions that really meets the reader where they are and helps them accomplish their task. Staging, in a nutshell, is the right person with the right place with the right stuff. Think of it as setting the stage for success for a particular procedure. It's making sure that the reader has all of the information they need before they begin. And some of this is pretty obvious, and some of it might be a little bit more nuanced. We want to make sure that they have the right tools and equipment. We want to make sure that they're in the right environment. We want to make sure that they have the right human resources and materials. We also want to make sure they have the right level of expertise and the right level of time. And I want you to be very specific about this. So to go back to my kind of silly example of making cookies, if I'm listing the ingredients, I could be relatively generic and say that you need milk and that you need butter and that you need flour and that you need sugar. And that's okay, and again, that would probably yield something that resembles a cookie. But what was probably more effective is if I'm hyper-specific and that I eliminate some of the key decisions that a first-time reader would have to make. And by that I mean you would probably tell them exactly what type of milk and what type of butter. Should it be salted or unsalted? What fat content should the milk have? What type of sugar? What type of flour? And in so doing, you're eliminating some of those decisions that, again, if they're not made in line with what our expectations or our needs are probably going to inhibit efficiency and consistency and those types of things. And so it's really important that when you're thinking through how to set the stage for a particular task, that you're being as specific as possible. Again, we're trying to eliminate those decisions. The same thing is true of tools and equipment. If somebody needs to have, a Phillips head screwdriver to carry out some task, well, it's important for you to tell them, what size, etc. Same thing with an environment. It's easy to say, well, you want to do this indoors. Well, okay, that's great, but should I be on a non-porous surface? Should I have a level working area? Should I have a well-ventilated area? What should the lighting be like? And those are the types of things that I really want you to think about. Because, again, ideally, we're trying to create the ideal circumstances for success. And so anytime you sit down to write, the first thing you should think about when you're trying to guide somebody through a procedure is, do I have the right person in the right place with the right stuff? And if you can confidently say that, then chances are you've set the stage. I'm sure we've all had experiences where we've begun a procedure and it turns out that we don't have the right stuff, that we're missing a key ingredient, that we're missing a key resource, and that we can't do it. Sometimes it's a second set of hands. Really this task would be easier, safer, more efficient, and the results more consistent if you have another person or two. And those are important things because, again, if our goal isn't just to get somebody from point A to point B, but to get them to point A to point B in the most efficient and effective way possible, then we really have to take into account how we set the stage, because that's really going to determine a lot. The second key move in a set of instructions is coaching. And I like that word coaching because it's not just instructing, it's not just directing, which is a relatively passive process. You're actively coaching somebody. And so if we think about what a coach does, I want you to think about that as being your role in the instructions writing process. And so I want you to think about a number of things, but I just want you to live into that sort of moniker of coach. And so to do that, I think you need to have simple and easy to read steps, which means that they're written in clear language, that they're written in sort of a directive voice, meaning that they're driven by verbs, that you have one action per step. I want you to not only think about getting somebody to do something, but getting them to do it with the best practices in mind. What's the best way to do this? And to do that, you're going to have to help the reader make decisions. When we're coaching, we want to use more than just words. We can use crap, so contrast, alignment, those types of things that create connections in the text and patterns in the text. We can also include images, so we can include helpful screenshots or photographs or diagrams that give people a sense of the landscape, the relative location of things, how to do certain things. In coaching, you should also think about breaking the process up into chunks or segments. So again, I'll go back to that example where you have 22 sequential steps that are single spaced. One of the things that we can do is we can think about groups of steps that could be under one heading. So the example I like to use is when you change the oil in a car. If I were writing instructions about how to do that, I could certainly have a sequential list that has 35 steps, and I have no doubt that somebody could follow that. But what might be more helpful is to think about sub-steps, if you will, or segments of the process. So, the first set of steps might explain how to gather your materials. The second set of steps might discuss how to jack and secure the car. The third set of steps might talk about how to drain the spent oil and remove the oil filter. And so you kind of get the point. And so if you can think about how to do that and break it up into chunks so that somebody can easily navigate and access the document, that's super important. And a really important aspect of a really good set of instructions is that you give indicators of success, that people have reference points, that they know when they can move on, when they know that they've been successful. And I want you to think about the sensory details, what somebody might see, what somebody might hear, what somebody might smell or feel. And that generally will give somebody a pretty good indication of when they can move on. So I want you to really keep that in mind, that people like to know when they're going through a process, when they can go to the next step or when they've been successful. And then the other thing that's really important when you're coaching is that you want to anticipate and overcome issues. So if you know from experience doing a process that there's a particular point in time when somebody has an opportunity to make a mistake or to make a decision that may impact the outcome of the process, it's important for you to anticipate those and to leverage your expertise. And so that's what coaching is all about, is helping people, again, not just get through the process, but to get them through the process consistently, efficiently, and safely. And then finally, the final sort of set of moves is alerting. And this is super important for keeping people safe and making sure that they don't spoil the process. And alerting is really about letting the reader know in advance of problem areas or hazards. And there's really only two rules about alerts. They have to be timely and they have to be conspicuous. So when I say timely, I mean these alerts need to happen before the hazard, well before. So an alert is no good if you've already over-tightened something, right? Or you have failed to clean something before reapplying it or reconnecting it. And so you really want to make sure that you're providing these these alerts well in advance of the hazard. And then finally, they need to be conspicuous. So they need to scream, "Hey, read me, this is important." And so when we think about conspicuous, we think about contrast, something that you learned when we were learning about crap. So it should be bigger, it should be bolder, it should have maybe a color associated with it. A lot of times we think of red. But that's why we use things like skull and crossbones and red text and stop signs and those types of things. It's because they provide a visual cue and they're conspicuous. And so I'm convinced that if you set the stage, meaning you have the right person with the right place with the right stuff, that you think of yourself less as somebody who's instructing and more as somebody who's coaching, and that you think carefully about how you alert a reader to potential hazards or problems, you are going to write a very, very thorough and comprehensive and useful set of instructions. And so those are the things that I really want you to think about, and I look forward to helping you and giving you feedback on this, because I can't stress the importance of standard operating procedures and desk level procedures and instructional guides and manuals in the workplace, because they really do preserve our knowledge and they make sure that we're doing things in the best, most optimal way. So thank you very much.